welcome to the studio review of SmackDown vs. Raw 2006. Now, I'll start off by saying it would be very easy to categorize this as a simple update to SmackDown vs. Raw, but that doesn't really do justice to the type of updates they've made to the game. This year there's a big focus on balancing gameplay, and they've done this by adding the stamina meter. The stamina meter simply works by the bigger the move you perform, the more stamina you lose. So you can't just execute 100 power bombs in a row to get the pin. You have to think more carefully, mix it up with a few punches, stop to rest every now and again. It slows the match down, which is really a good thing for SmackDown, because it's always been considered very arcadey, very high speed. And on that note, that's one of the other things they've improved. Now when you climb up ladders and the cage and the cell, it's a lot more realistic. You don't shoot up like Spider-Man. Another way to make the game more balanced is they've added, well, they've always had reversals, but this year they seem a lot easier. The computer pulls them out of nowhere. The reversal system isn't really balanced as such. It means whoever's tapping the shoulder buttons will usually come off on top. Also, to add to the TV style presentation of the game, they've added the pre-match games from the previous game. You can now select which type you want to play for a match. They're not especially engaging, it just adds a little bit more to make it look like television. I personally think I'm going to turn them off after a while because they're not really worth the time. And when you just want to get on with the game, it seems a bit of a delay. In the story mode this year, the cutscenes have been greatly improved. You can see this from one of the cutscenes here. I'll show you.
Eddie's going for that urn, Cole. And whoever holds that demonic urn controls The Undertaker.
Now you can see everything looks a lot more realistic. Your character now has a voice if you create a wrestler to play it. The wrestlers are all voiced like last year. The commentators make relevant comments. Unfortunately, to get this amount of detail into the story, it's a very linear story, because if they gave you lots of paths, you wouldn't be able to invest as much time in each of those paths. So it's a very linear storyline. You can either play through the SmackDown season or the Raw season, so you've got two season modes, but that's about it. Another new addition this year is the GM mode, which is sort of like a manager's version of the season mode. I haven't played that one yet, but it's mostly text-based. Doesn't really look like my sort of thing, but if you're into your football manager, the kind of looking after everything, making sure everyone's getting paid and happy and whatnot, that might be a nice addition for you. One of the new match types this year has been the Buried Alive match. It's one that's been hotly contested, that fans of the SmackDown series have wanted ever since the casket match from SmackDown 2, which I'm still not entirely sure why they removed, but now it's back and it's in full flow. The dynamic to win the game is pretty simple. You've got to put the person in the casket by tapping as many buttons as you can after you've whipped them into it, and then you've got to use the right analog stick to shut the door. The opponent has two chances to get out. They can either resist being put in the casket in the first place, or they can put their hand out to stop the lid coming down. It's a bit of a long-winded match because you can't really put the lid down until you really put at least most of your opponent in the red. It's definitely a worthwhile addition though. The shovel makes for an interesting weapon. It doesn't break, so it's always there and you know where to find it. This particular match came from the season mode, so just after I win it goes to a cutscene, which again shows off some of the really nice story mode features that put in.
That's okay. Don't worry about it, Tori. I don't want to be responsible for my #1 diva missing her flight. You feel me? I'll catch up with you next week.
Thanks, Teddy. I'll see you Thursday.
Damn! I hate to see that girl go, but I love watching her leave. Holla!
What was that? Teddy? Oh my God, Teddy! Don't worry, Teddy. It's going to be okay. Help! Somebody please help!
Next up, we're going to take a look at the Locker Room, which is another new edition of SmackDown vs. Raw 2006. Basically, it's a way of managing yourself over the season mode, but you can also view what achievements you've made through the game. You can customize it to make it look like your locker room. It's a bit superfluous. You don't need it. It can be a little slow sometimes when you're wanting to update creative wrestler points or attributes or anything, but it's a very nice aesthetic touch. You can change the sofas, you can change what's on the walls, you can store all your achievements, such as, well, after the Buried Alive match I got the Undertaker's urn, which is now residing in my trophy cabinet, which is nice. And my personal favourite area of the SmackDown vs Raw, or any SmackDown, any wrestling game, any game you can think of, is the Creator Wrestler. This year they've gone back to basics. They've removed all the menus and built it from scratch. A lot of the textures and shirts and stuff you'll see are pretty much the same as always, but now they've put depth into them, so it looks like your shirt is actually being worn by you rather than being spray painted onto you. Everything looks a lot slicker. The face morphing technology in this one is a lot more in depth. You can make it look pretty much like anyone you can imagine. As you can see here, I obviously go for myself because that's what I always do. That's how I create people. The move list hasn't been improved that much. A lot more animations are looking slicker than before, but on the whole you won't notice a great deal of change. There's not that many new moves, but the ones that are there seem to be geared towards more brawler or old school type. You won't see any new high-flying moves or new submission moves or anything like that. And the other new addition this year is the creator entrance option. It gives you a bit more flexibility over what you can do. You can choose from 4 different parts of your entrance. That's from coming onto the stage, coming down the ramp, going into the ring, and what you do when you're in the ring. It's a nice little addition. You can set pyro for 2 parts of the entrance, and the music. This year the music isn't very wide choice, and you can choose from all the wrestlers' entrances, and you get all the background music from the menus, but they all either fall into the rap or rock categories, and sometimes you want something a bit different. But on the whole, the creator entrance is a very nice addition. It makes your character that little bit more independent. You can choose from stock entrances, but you can also now select very customizable entrances, which is something I always like because I like to customize characters as much as I can. So I think that about wraps it up for SmackDown vs Raw 2006 this year. It's a great improvement over SmackDown vs Raw 2005. It's taking a much more seasoned, veteran approach to wrestling, making things look a lot better. But there's still some rough edges. It's still a SmackDown game. You're still going to clip through, miss some animations, do things wrong, end up losing for the stupidest of reasons because you couldn't quite get the controls to work properly. But it's SmackDown. That's what it's always going to be. I suggest, even if you've got SmackDown vs Raw, buy this game because it is so much better than the predecessor. Perhaps not as good as some of the older SmackDown titles, because I still think the old PlayStation 1 SmackDowns were the best, but this is definitely a great improvement over last year's entry. So buy it.
I also think it's safe to say it's hurting the Latino heat.